By day, Samir was a celebrated surgeon, a man whose hands were trusted to preserve life. By night, he became a rogue scientist, stalking hospital morgues to conduct experiments on the bodies that no one claimed. His first breakthrough came through chemistry. He developed a dense reactive smoke that, when pumped into a glass chamber, could artificially stimulate dead tissue into a state of mimicry. The result was a hollow success. The corpses would twitch, and their lifeless eyes would abruptly snap open, but they remained blank shells. There was no consciousness behind the movement, only the imitation of life. Frustrated by the limits of dead flesh, Samir realized he needed more than a body. He needed the spark of a living essence. He turned his focus away from the cadavers and towards his own reflection, convinced that the mirror held a conscious copy of himself waiting to be liberated. His medical ambition warped into a megalomaniacal obsession. He wasn't interested in saving lives anymore. He wanted to command a new dimension and preside over the entities he planned to pull into our world. When biological science failed to produce a person, Samir chose to abandon biology for the metaphysical. The real horror began the moment he decided that if he couldn't find a soul in a body, he would manufacture one from a shadow. Samir watched the glass for weeks until the reflection finally broke character. It stood perfectly still while Samir moved, staring back at him with a malicious grin and hands heavily stained in dark blood. Terrified by the loss of control, Samir grabbed a heavy hammer and swung it with everything he had, hoping to shatter the glass and end the nightmare. The mirror didn't break. Instead, the force of the blow was redirected. A massive, jagged wound tore open across Samir's own abdomen, mirroring the exact spot where his hammer struck the glass. This is the transference principle. The reflection hijacked the causal loop, absorbing the hammer's impact and reversing the kinetic force into its creator. The blow didn't damage the mirror's occupant, it broke the dimensional seal, allowing the physical entity to cross into our reality. When you strike out at an anomaly you don't understand, you often destroy the only thing protecting you from it. The laboratory environment distorted. The broken mirror frame transformed into an unyielding, transparent wall, pinning Samir against the dark side of the glass. Samir lay on the floor, bleeding and helpless. On the other side of the transparent barrier, his clone stood tall in a pristine white coat, looking down at his original with clinical indifference. Shadowy entities from the laboratory's darkest corners emerged. They seized Samir and dragged him backward, deeper into the dark dimension he had tried to exploit. Before sealing the path, the clone whispered his final intent. He would walk out of the laboratory and assume Samir's identity, living the doctor's life and performing his surgeries while the original was forgotten. Samir faced a fate far more absolute than death. He was being systematically replaced, relegated to a spectator of his own stolen existence. Inside the mirror dimension, the darkness was thick and suffocating. Curiously, the agonizing pain in Samir's abdomen began to fade into a strange cold numbness. His body began to undergo a grotesque mutation. His bones cracked and shifted as his limbs elongated, his entire skeletal structure flattening against the invisible surface of the void. The change reached a cellular level. His flesh hardened and smoothed out, and his skin crystallized into a solid, reflective silver surface. The clone, now in the real world, established the rules of their new bond. He drew a surgical blade across his own wrist, and though he felt nothing, real blood began to pour from the surface of a mirror where Samir was trapped. Samir had achieved a form of immortality, but as a paralyzed vessel. He was now a permanent witness to every injury his double would ever inflict upon himself. He was a living pane of glass mounted to a wall, weeping blood through silver pores, with no mouth left to scream for help. Samir's pursuit of godhood ended in the total loss of his humanity. He was now a silent object, forced to reflect the world without ever being part of it again.